Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Carol Hussey, and I'll be your moderator for the conversation today, where we're talking about taking a half step and a smarter approach to HHS modernization. Today, we have with us Chris Smith, an enterprise architect and CMS compliancy expert from Mississippi with the Department of Medicaid there, or the Division of Medicaid, sorry about that. And then we also have Gary Katz, who's a senior account executive with Progress MarkLogic. And I'm thrilled today to be here talking with you about one of our big challenges in this space and the opportunities that come with that. And that is the need to modernize within HHS service delivery systems and operations. And, we want to discuss those pretty candidly today and talk about, a lot of state and local HHS organizations are really under enormous pressure right now. And you're being asked to modernize legacy systems, improve data sharing, support new program requirements, all kinds of things, and improve outcomes for your citizens, all while dealing with workforce shortages, budget constraints, and a lot of public scrutiny, right? And so that's a lot to bear. And then on top of that, the funding, that we're seeing cuts, happening pretty prevalently. The approach to securing that funding and the oversight that comes with that has a lot of challenges with it as well. And so states are going to be under more and more pressure to show the value of the investments that the federal government is making on your systems. And one of the big truths, that we're seeing around the country is many of these very large scale modernization efforts are failing. They are taking years and years, they're costing many millions of dollars, and they're still falling short on delivering real value to your agencies. And so that's why we're here today. We want to talk about a smarter way to modernize, knowing that you have a strategic endpoint, right? And that you can look at achieving value along the way. You're not waiting 5 or 7 years and then seeing that something's not delivering value. What are the things that you can do now with the money you have and make an impact for your agency? So over the next 45 minutes, we're going to break this down for you, what this actually looks like in practice. You're going to walk away with some very tangible tips on how you could proceed with modernization in a more incremental fashion. And the worst thing you could do is wait, right? We know a lot of folks are dealing with 30-year-old legacy systems. You don't want to wait until you're forced to do something. And so we're going to talk to you today about some of those first steps that you can take to begin that modernization journey. So we're going to dive right in, and we're going to talk first about some of the risks of that big bang modernization that I just mentioned. And so, Chris, as you were starting to take a closer look at how you're going to modernize in Mississippi, obviously most states are doing big bang projects, very large price tags. What were you thinking about when you were making decisions about what that journey would look like for Mississippi?
Well, we have obviously several different programs here, but a key program is the interoperability program. And this is something we've been working on for quite a while, trying to take, these, I don't want to say older, but more strategic systems such as the claims adjudication system, the eligibility system, other systems like that, and really taking that data and aggregating it and making it more meaningful. Aggregating it and using analytics, population health, different, quality reporting, different ways and means to really access that data and make it more actionable. And, there has been a lot of change over the past 5 to 10 years with CMS, Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, wanting more reporting on these things. You see social determinants of health, you see quality reporting, a lot of changes where the data seems to be becoming more and more powerful and useful. And so we're really looking at how we're going to do it. And so we have an interoperability program, which I oversee, and the goal was to go out, and our first thought was we were going to build a unified data lake. Data lakes were emerging at the time. This is several years ago, and really put all our data in there. We have claims data, we have clinical data, we have eligibility data. We've got kind of a unique system here at Mississippi Medicaid where we connect to some of the largest providers in the state who have electronic health records, EHRs, running Epic. So we share clinical data and aggregate clinical data on our beneficiaries only. That's all we're allowed to do in real time. So we have some rich clinical data. We have, of course, claims data, paying for the claims, eligibility data, other data. And our thought was, let's put it in a data lake and really start to normalize that, transform it, and then apply analytics and population health and other services on top of it. So we wrote an RFP, request for proposal, published it, got it approved by CMS, sent it out, and then it was awarded, and that took about 2.5 years. And then after award, it was protested. So it was held up in legal and the courts for quite a while. And meanwhile, CMS came out with these final rules on interoperability with required timelines, and we thought, well, we're just not going to make it. This big bang is not going to work. So we took a step back last year and started looking at how do we achieve and make these goals possible by using other competitive procurement vehicles, because we have to, but also more piecemeal, right? Not doing a whole big bang and really putting pieces and parts together. And that's where we came across Progress Smart Logic and Gary and his team, and really looked at them for an operational data store, core component to replace that data lake, because we have to have somewhere for our data to go. That was foundational to us. So that was one of, if not the first key pieces we looked at. Where are we going to put all this data? How are we going to access it? How are we going to transform it? How are we going to use it? Because you can't apply all these systems and services and even share the data or do anything with analytics and population health if you don't have a foundational data store. So that was our transition from the Big Bang, where we tried the Big Bang and it didn't work, and moved to this more kind of piecemeal approach of getting the best vendors we can. And really, I think it's been very good for us, because we're able to now go and get more COTS, commercial off the shelf software, which is best of breed, and less customized solutions like we'd get in RFPs from some of the integrated solutions, which combined a bunch of vendors and systems. Now we can kind of go to the grocery store and pick the best products and then come in and tie them all together and integrate them. So that's really the path we started on, made that left turn, and now we're currently on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like, a lot of states are reluctant, to go down the best of breed COTS path. And part of that is, that's not what we've historically done in state and local, right? We're used to systems being custom developed specifically to our needs for a specific program. But you mentioned, and I think this is true of a lot of programs in health and human services, a lot of service delivery is actually happening outside of the agency with a variety of providers, community partners, et cetera. And so you can only control anyway what's in your agency. Even if you're dictating the use of your system, quite often, especially the bigger providers, they have their own systems anyway. So I think there's this notion of interoperability going forward is going to become even a bigger deal for state and local government compared to historically how we dictated use of a single monolithic system.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think we were lucky in that those CMS final rules, 9115 for patient access and 0057 for prior authorization, and the other associated APIs, payer to provider and payer to payer, those came out and were modified and changed and updated slightly along this path, because we already had those goals to modernize and put this data together, which was an aggressive goal. But then with CMS also saying, hey, you need to do these final rules, you need to meet these final rules on these deadlines, really allowed us to combine those two driving, initiatives into one. Okay, we wanted to do that anyway, and now CMS has the funding, enhanced funding to help us do it, and also we can repurpose, recycle, reuse, right? What we're doing with Gary and Progress Smart Logic on the operational data store, and not just have it as just a giant bucket out there. We throw everything in and slap analytics on. No, we can use it now to actually become our fire repository, HL7 Fire, Fast Healthcare, interoperability resources, which is a key component and of both CMS final rules. So, and then working with Gary and Progress Smart Logic on the ODS and the USCDI, the core data for interoperability, the clinical data formats, which are required, and we're still doing things with CCDA, and I could get into that a long time and talk about it forever. But, kind of CMS forcing, agencies to share data and providers and payers to share data, and also to move to these standards like FHIR and USCDI, really is going to, for us, help us move the needle and get off some of these legacy formats. We will have to do some data transformation, but the timing really worked out. It was actually beneficial, right? We were pretty bummed about the protest and everything because we'd done a lot of work. I personally had about three and a half years on that project, right? So I was pretty disappointed. But what I'm excited about is now we're, like I said, grocery shopping, and we're picking the best products and services and going out there and getting what we need. And we're reusing it not only for these final rules, but also we've come across, we're working with, MarkLogic on implementing the operational data store right now. And, every day almost I have to call Gary and say, hey, we talked to this group who wants this data. Hey, we talked to this group who wants this data. So when I say recycle, reuse, we really are. We're finding a lot of synergies with the data. Once we get the data into that operational data store, we have stakeholders coming to us and say, I could never do this. I could never do that. So this is pretty exciting for them. I think it's a bit traumatic for Gary because he's got a laundry list about this long now of things he needs to do with the operational data store. But, at the same time, we're, as I said, migrating towards all these standards. So, and I'm not going to sit here and, I'm a realist. I'm not going to sit here and tell you we're moving everything to FHIR and everything to USCDI. We do have legacy formats, but we also partnered with our friends at Infor Cloverleaf and purchased their Cloverleaf Enterprise Service Bus, and that's our data integration and transformation layer. So we protected ourselves to say, okay, if we still have legacy connections that maybe we can't upgrade or need more time to upgrade, we can transform the data in and out of that layer and not put it all on Gary and MarkLogic at the ODS. But it's also allowed us to, like I said, grocery shop, and we've got some really, really good vendors we're excited about. We got a master person index from Verato. They've been great. We just purchased Okta for identity, and we're going to use that with ID.me. I mentioned Infor Cloverleaf. They've been great to work with. Gary, of course, with Progress Smart Logic, Operational Data Store. And, we're implementing the first layer of those FHIR APIs required. We actually went live this summer with the provider directory, and we're working on patient access. So we really are putting together these pieces and parts to really get a great solution of off-the-shelf software. And I think, Carol, you made a really, really good point. We're trying to get away from that customization because it's really hard on us, and we become beholden to those vendors. And anytime you need a change order, it's going to be $1 million or $2 million or $3 million, and it takes forever to do it, right? It's not reactionary. It's very reactionary, but it's not good for the agency because we can't really make these changes quickly. Whereas with this off-the-shelf software now, they're revving all the time, right? We're getting better versions all the time, all the time, all the time. They're working on it. And so we're going from more of a customized approach to a more off-the-shelf approach where I'd like to say we're going to get to 95, 90, 95% off-the-shelf software with very limited customization, right? So that's really exciting to move kind of from that. And hopefully the change orders are not, here, they're down here.
Right.
But trying to get away from that customization and to work on more standards. We want to say standards, standards, standards. That's what we want to move to.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, I mean, it is a definite paradigm shift in government. I actually just spoke to an agency a couple of weeks ago, and they were pretty adamant that we need to own the code. And I said, why? Why do you need to own the code, right? So because at the same time they were saying we'd really love to be the beneficiary of downstream, enhancements to the software. And I said, well, if you own the code, that's not what you're going to get, right? So, there's some significant value, and also the R&D and investment that goes into creating these products. You could never pay a vendor to custom create those things for you in the time frame that you have in terms of investment to be as robust, right, as something that you can get off the shelf. So but if you buy it
That's
off the
right.
shelf, you're going to implement it quicker, you're going to realize the value of it quicker, and you're going to get those downstream enhancements that you talked about. So owning the code, it may not get you anything. It may feel like you're getting some freedom or some flexibility, but at the end of the day, what are you going to do with that?
Well, and it's a great point. And I mean, I was going to say, oh, I don't know if I agree with you, but you added that on the customization, but you added that key phrase in the time we required, right?
Yeah.
Sure, we could build anything if we had enough time and money, but I think you hit the nail on the head. Getting this software off the shelf, and I'll bring up one of our vendors. Verado was just in giving us an update, and they said we had some customers come to us and want to do this, and this, and we're going to fix it and make it available to everybody as the next rep, right? So it's not just us in a ship on a lonely sea, trying to navigate this. We're seeing other payers, and while they may not be Medicaid specific, they do have similar use cases sometimes and ways to use it where we don't have to do that customization and we don't have to wait forever to do it. I mean, we have built custom solutions forever, but why would we do this, right? HL7 Fire is a standard, right? These APIs are standards. We need to get away from this, building it or even owning the code. I think there has to be a mind shift away from owning the code or running it on-prem to let's use SaaS, or let's buy a subscription, or let's use the cloud. I should mention everything that I mentioned, the two products we started with, which is Progress, the operational data store, and Infor Cloverleaf, the enterprise service bus, the ESB. Both of those are running in our tenant in AWS, Amazon Web Services, right? So we don't want any more on-prem. We're out of that business, right? We're going to utilize the cloud and leverage the cloud and utilize those efficiencies. Verado's at AWS, right? And AWS is making a large investment in Mississippi with building 2 new data centers here. So, I mean, they've been a good partner. So, I mean, really, again, trying to move to these standards and get away from these one-offs, because, we just lose a lot of control. Nobody else has what we have when it's custom built. And now, we feel a lot better. We have our vendors coming to us telling us other customers want the same thing we want, and maybe we don't have to pay full price for a change order or do something crazy like that.
Yeah. Right. Excellent. Gary, I'd love for you, Chris mentioned several things about implementing and the benefits that were received very quickly, and then you give those benefits to your users and then they want more. Can you talk a little bit about that, speed to market and what you mean by the half step?
Absolutely. No, I think Chris did a great job sizing up exactly how Mississippi Division of Medicaid wound up leaning into what, out of necessity, what has become the reality for the rest of government with the, in the current climate within the federal environment and the scrutiny that's being placed upon federal funding, which is the Division of Medicaid leaned in and took the reins and said, we're going to start doing this ourselves. We're going to, drive results faster by taking some ownership directly in here and actually, piecing parts of it together themselves in order to get that result. But in order to do that, you need to have vendors who are going to be able to turn that around very quickly. And that doesn't necessarily look like the traditional vendor, the large, 800-pound gorilla in the room, but rather the vendor who's a trusted mission partner, who's right there in the foxhole with you, who is just as committed to be able to getting things done. So with that context, we have never been shy, and I say this, we, Progress Mark Logic, I will speak a little personally here. I have been screaming from the hilltops, if a vendor wants your business, they're going to be willing to prove it. And I would tell all government customers, make them prove it, because there's a lot of vaporware, there's a lot of architectures that are out there, but what really sends the message home is showing where the rubber hits the road, how quickly you were able to do it, and what innovation it brought. And that is exactly what the Division of Medicaid placed upon us. They brought us, for instance, a quintessential problem of what kept them up at night, if you will, which I think that was the what kept them up at night that day, because they actually have a lot of other things that they were looking to do as well. But it was a good one to sink in. And so I'm going to share my screen very quickly and just show, we're going to show some results here. So let me share screen. I think everyone can see my screen. There we go. I now can't see the camera. So Carol and Chris, can you confirm you guys can see my screen now?
We
Yes,
can,
we can.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So first challenge that the Division of Medicaid brought to us was something called provider roll-up. It was the final rule for the disclosure of ownership for certain providers in terms of, you have different providers who acquire other provider organizations through mergers and acquisitions, but ultimately you need to be able to go and track where are the dollars going to, who's the ultimate end provider. So this took us about 2.5 FTEs for 6 weeks, about 600 hours or so. We spent 3 weeks on the data and then 3 weeks building out an application that was aimed at the end user to showcase their own data to them. There's little details about the tech stack underneath there for any folks who may be interested in that. But the 3 pillars of this were very simple. In the time that we had to clean up the data and do the things in the data platform that could help to improve the quality of the data. When you are figuring things out about, provider A is the same as provider B, is it the same as provider R? You need to be able to account for the fact that sometimes you're going to say, hey, these different providers look like they're all the same. And sometimes there might be an error. It's the mastering process, if you will. So you need a way to be able to adjust that so that a business user can say, yeah, A, B, and C are all the same, but D, let's pop that one out of there because that actually belongs somewhere else. And most importantly, how do you gain insights into how your payments are actually being made and to whom they're being made? So we put in calculations to be able to say, hey, based off of these merged groups, we're going to say, here's how much money you've been paying to these providers, and you can even filter that down based off of certain CPT codes. So I'm just going to go through a couple quick screenshots here of this, but here's one, McLaren Regional Medical Center. We had identified 5 different sub-entities, if you will, or tax IDs. Turns out that Genesis Regional Medical Center was incorrect. So, let me move forward. We'll show that in a moment. We provided financial analytics screens so that you could actually sift through, and there was no PII in here or PHI, but we were able to go and show the volume of claims and costs by that particular group. And then we provided a mechanism for them to be able to go and pop out that one Genesis Regional Medical Center out into a different group and recreate the groups. Now, why is this, from a screenshot perspective, compelling? Because this is the real business problem that it solved, which is we were able to identify that McLaren Regional Medical Center, McLaren Greater Lansing, is the same thing as Ingham Regional Medical Center. even though they had different names, different tax IDs, different mailing addresses, and different physical addresses, we were able to resolve that they were in fact the same entities. And that's a hard data problem to solve, but with the right platform where you can quickly churn the data and then quickly turn out an app that uses that data, with the right platform and the right team, you can very quickly get results. And that's exactly what we did. Another example, something that we've done for the Division of Medicaid is something we called the AI compliance analysis and reporting capability. The idea here was the state plan, the state has a plan that it submits to CMS, what the Division of Medicaid commits and says they're going to do. Then internally, they have admin codes that specify how they're going to meet those commitments. The question is, are there any gaps in what they say they're going to do versus how they codify what they're going to do, so that a business analyst can look and make sure that they're covering themselves between how they codify the codes and their commitments to CMS? This took 3 FTEs for 4 weeks, about 480 hours to do. And the quick side of this is that we put in agentic AI to pre-process the data. We put in a full interface for a business user to look at it, and then we provided what we call a gap report that could be pushed out to business users so that they could evaluate it. This is a quick screenshot of what this interface looked like, to be able to go and show, hey, I want to go and sift through different parts of the plan, parts of the codes, and gauge what are my gaps. And you can look at the requirements, compare it to the gaps that came out by sending it to an LLM out in the cloud, and then be able to show with the full lineage which rules that you had, which codes actually covered this, and then ultimately pop out a report that could be shown to a business analyst to run that down and verify if the gaps are legitimate and or if they're covered by other things. So the key pieces here, and I'm just going to build through the slide because I don't want to go and do the build through, is when we talk about speed to mission, it's not just about the technology, it's about investing in the answers that you want to get out of it with the right team, with the right platform. And don't be shy of putting a partner who you're going to bring in to a long-term commitment to help you do the business of your organization. Don't be afraid to make them prove it, because someone who wants your business will get in and prove it to you. And then ultimately, this whole notion of the half step is that this was not a big bang approach. These were very quick hits to be able to go and build out capabilities that show incremental improvements and that build upon each other, that can then be shown back to the federal government to show, look, we said we were going to do something and we did it, to help perhaps justify further investments down the road. And that is critical in the current federal climate as to how the government is looking at investments in federal subsidizations of state programs. So with that, Carol, I think that I'll turn back to you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That, I mean, clearly demonstrates the value, right, of early data investments, especially as we're working with so many partners in delivering various human services. I can think of variety of use cases in child welfare and other mental health, behavioral health sort of examples as well, where just what you're showing, whether it be claims or providers or benefits recipients, lots of different methods for when we're bringing data together, making sure that we understand the context of how we're spending our money and what we're getting for that from a programmatic perspective. So thanks for that. And I also appreciated too, the reminder that it's not a massive build. It doesn't take a long time. And when we start to see what we can get out of it, then we realize, oh, we can do more. Let's expand upon that and grow it over time. That evolution and maturing of your data environment. Chris, you spoke to your users, that you give them a little bit and they want more. They're like, oh, wow. The power of that data is really, really impressive. One of the things that I hear a lot in working with states is their frustration with procurement, right? where this is where not just your local procurement, but even your APDs and IAPDs to secure that federal funding that's needed to supplement some of these efforts, and you know, how difficult and challenging that is, as well as then working with your local procurement team. And when we were preparing for this meeting, Gary kind of, you know, in fun called Chris a procurement Sherpa. And so I'd love to hear more about that, Chris, how you navigated this, because a lot of the people I work with are like, nope, I'm doing one procurement, that's it. This notion of COTS, best of breed, I don't have a tolerance for that. How did you navigate all that from the APD all the way through procurement within your state?
Well, I mean, going back to the RFP process, obviously we worked in partnership with our friends at CMS to, you know, outline our strategy of an RFP, the big bang that didn't happen. But, you know, as I said, I think I worked on that over 3 years. Obviously, we put it in the APD and defined what we were going to buy, the goals, you know, of the program, what we're going to do, and how we're going to migrate. And, you know, that got approved. And obviously, you know, along the way with RFPs, they take a while because, you know, your agency has to get it approved, and then the state has to approve it, or your IT oversight board. Meanwhile, CMS has to approve it. Then it goes out. You know, I think we got 450 questions in, and those have to be answered and reviewed as well. And then that goes back out, and then you know, go through your process and finally decide on somebody and negotiate a contract, and then that has to go, you know, to the state again and procurement board, and then to CMS, and that gets approved, and then you're ready to sign, and then you get a protest. So, you know, at that point, we'd been looking at options for competitive procurements, you know, and so we looked at a variety of contracts. There's Texas DIR, there's NASPO, National Association of State Procurement Officials, and the GSA, Schedule 70, General Services Administration's Schedule 70 for IT. That's a federal. And we were in a good spot because the state had been working on these other contracting vehicles, and I give them kudos because they were progressive enough to say, hey, look, you know, these RFPs are just taking so long, especially when they depend on federal oversight and federal approval at every step along the way. And I think the concern for us was, and I go to several conferences and talk to my peers, is by the time you're 3 years in on an RFP, the technology's changed, right? You know, I know one of the questions we got, well, why did you get, you know, for the RFP on the data lake, going back to that, why did you choose a data lake? Data lake house is now what you really want. And, you know, so in that time that we thought we'd gone cutting edge, the whole thing had changed again. So, and people said, well, data warehouse is coming back, you know, in fashion, and we're going to do it this way. So, it's really hard to keep up with private industry on all the changes and how fast technology is accelerating. But we looked at these different contracts, and I will tell you, of the 3 or 4 that I mentioned, we purchased on all of them. We made a purchase on Texas DIR, we purchased MarkLogic on the GSA, and then we continue to buy pieces and parts on NASPO using those procurement vehicles. And luckily and happily for us, you know, CMS and the state consider all 3 of those contracting vehicles competitive procurements. So it allows us, instead of, you know, going through the process of writing that whole 2-year front end RFP, to actually really create more of an SOW, statement of work, and then go out to the vendor community, look and see what we really like and what we want, and put it out there for bid. And those bids can come back now in days, not weeks, months, and things like that. And then we can take them, depending on price, of course, through our procurement process, IT oversight board, and IT agency here in the state, and also CMS, which still, you know, you have to do. But that time, you know, that front end 2-year timeline is condensed down now to about 60 days, maybe 90. And then you add, you know, you've got CMS oversight, you know, 60 days at CMS, 60 days maybe over here, which we can run at the same time, you know, and you're looking at, okay, now maybe we're talking 4, 5, 6 months for procurement from cradle to, you know, execution of the contract. And that's lightning fast in state government, right? Compared with 3.5 years of my life spent on one RFP, right? Honestly, I don't know how many more of those RFPs I have in me if they're going to take 3.5 years and have 450 questions, which, by the way, every answer has to be scrutinized by multiple parties, including legal and oversight and this and that and everything in between. So it allowed us to work more efficiently, quickly, but we have to navigate the rules and follow the terms of the contract and the purchasing, and there are resellers involved in different areas and things all happening on that. But we purchased enterprise products and best of breed COTS, off-the-shelf software, using this. And I think I looked this morning, we're up to, I believe, 9 purchases via those various vehicles since we started this almost 15 months ago. So we've completed 9 enterprise software purchases, including Progress MarkLogic for the operational data store, the ODS and Fire server, and Import Cloverleaf as well, and Verado and Okta, everything I've mentioned, in about 15 months. And so I had one of my colleagues tell me that's unheard of, and I said, well, I thought it took too long myself, coming because I was promised much faster timelines, but you have to go and still follow those requirements for approval and oversight. But yeah, we're pretty excited about it, that we have been able to get great software products and great solutions in the door quickly, and we're able to start putting them together and building something. I do think there's fatigue out there on the front end. When you go in and it takes 2.5 years or 2 years to build right and get an RFP out the door, and it takes a lot of people to do that, and it's quite challenging. So whereas this is myself and the procurement team, we want this solution, this is the best one, let's put it out for bid. Okay, there we go. And we're running, and the procurement's out there for days or maybe a week or two instead of months and months and months. Yeah. 3 to 4 months of an RFP, waiting for people to send in questions, and then you have to respond, and then 3 or 4 months for that. There's a year, right? It just doesn't scale. What you're buying is out of date, right? I use the analogy all the time. It's 2025. We write an RFP. By the time we get it, it's going to be 2030, and we're going to get a car that's from 2025. Nobody wants that, right? Yeah. You want something that can come in and be actionable and work right away.
Yeah, for sure. And I should point out to our audience too, we use the term products a lot, but many of these products come with services as well as part of the purchase. And you can also purchase just services on many of those contract vehicles that Chris mentioned as well. So don't think that you're on your own. You're not buying shrink wrap software. It's not quite like that. You'll get, the implementation support and experts that you need to get these things implemented. So I wanted to point that out. And I will ask our audience too, if you have questions, please drop those in on the right side of your screen there. You should see an option to put the questions in. And while we're waiting to see if any questions come in, Chris, I would love for you to, we have about 5 minutes left, I think, to share with folks, kind of your advice to agencies that want to move forward with incremental modernization. They're feeling constrained by current planning and procurement processes. Don't even get me started on feasibility studies. But how about, what kind of advice for folks who are really just sort of thinking we've got to do something differently?
Well, I think you made a really good point, and thank you for bringing that up. Every single product that we purchased, that I mentioned, of the 8 or 9 I mentioned, we included professional services or subject matter expertise from the vendor themselves. Now, that may run for the contract term, or it may just be the startup phase till we can train our people and get our people, the appropriate skills and training on it, the build out, whatever. What we don't want to do, we're trying to be lean and fast to market, right? What we don't want to do is get software in here and then have someone have to go off to training for 6 months and it just sits there and we're paying for something we're not using. That's one of our mantras. We're not going to do that, right? So we need to spin these things up quickly, get them going, and get our staff trained. And if we don't have staff or we're bringing staff on, let's get it started and spun up here with the vendor and their expertise. And some of this is really, really complex stuff. So I don't want to scare anybody, but we do engage Progress Mark Logic. I think Gary can talk about this for a second, but I think half of our project with them is software and the other half is services, right? We had not used the platform before and we were excited about it, but we needed help. We needed help loading the data, processing the data, parsing the data, transforming the data, working with our transformation engine from N4 Cloverleaf, working with our master person index from Verato. So we have a lot of touch points and a lot of pieces and parts coming in. And so we have to bring in experts who know all this to help us navigate it, because I think now we're technology rich and still staff poor. We're always staff poor. But and back to your question, I think looking at pieces you can address immediately, right? And as you go, it doesn't have to be that big bang. These are complex IT projects and they touch a lot of systems, services, and data and people. So look at where you can start and get some wins. I know our leadership and everyone, CMS, everyone, no one wants to do a project where you can't see any benefit for 3 to 4 years. How is the project going? We have a report that says, okay, it's going okay, but what does that mean? Let's get some data and let's get something that's actionable. And kudos to Progress Mark Logic, or Gary talked about a couple of those projects they started. So our team and our management and leadership could look at it and CMS and say, okay, I see results, tactical results, things that they're doing, right? And now I think we may have opened up the Pandora's box, because we have lots of users coming saying they have projects and things to do, but that's better than the other side of the coin, right? Where you don't have anybody. But I mean, I think you have to look at this project by project, see what you can bite off and what you can take, and work with CMS and get your funding and get your strategy. And that can take some time, but once you do that, go to market quickly and talk to other states about how you can use some of these contracting vehicles and get out of that RFP world, if at all possible. Because like I said, they're all considered competitive procurements. So if you can shorten the cycle substantially, do so.
Yeah, appreciate that. And I love your comments about your workers being excited about this, because state government IT departments really struggle, obviously, with keeping up with private sector. And if you can get your IT staff excited about something and knowing that they are expanding their skills and they're learning this knowledge acquisition of your partnership with Mark Logic, and your folks are building their skills and learning new technology, that must be a big benefit.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting. I'll give you an example. One of our good vendors that we purchased Dynatrace, and they set up this environment. We tested it, and our team came in and said, wow, wow, this is really cool what this can do. And so there's a really good vibe with Dynatrace about, wow, we can do a lot with this. We also purchased ServiceNow, and it's like, why are we building our own portals or having people design our own portals when we have state-of-the-art, things like that? And then we go and look at some of our vendors we have in-house already today, and they're using ServiceNow. So it all ties together, right? Yeah. And some of them are using Dynatrace. So it's like standards beget standards beget standards, right? So it's just trying to stack these wins and these standards on top of each other and get out of this custom world that we're in over here.
Yeah, I love that. Gary, any final parting comments from you regarding taking the half step?
Yeah, I saw a question come in that dovetails into what Chris was mentioning on speed. So what we discussed were a couple use cases, that we were able to turn results around very quickly. But Chris mentioned that he onboarded like 9 vendors in 15 months. We went live with Provider Directory on July 1st or July 2nd. That full scale was a total of 6 months. And if I'm being really objective on there, it was actually less. It was more like 4 months because, in the beginning, there was sort of the, some permission stuff, getting the tenant, sort of normal friction when you start a project, the unexpected bumps. But by the time we hit that groove, where everyone was in and doing the work, it was like 4 months worth of work amongst all the vendors once everyone was up and moving. And now the team is working on patient access, no further friction because everyone's already moving through, and we are slated for that by end of this year. So that's those are tangible, that certainly provider directory tangible accomplishment in the first go around, and then a second milestone that's coming at us fast and furious that the team is heads down on. And those are very quick turnarounds, certainly from candidly from a state government perspective for sure, but even in any commercial project, those are fast turnarounds that's on par with commercial delivery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just want to add, Gary's talking about CMS final rule 9115, the first, which is provider directory and patient access. But we will also, we're already planning and I don't want to say scheming, but I guess scheming now how we're going to meet 0057. And again, we're eating our own dog food. We're using Progress Smart Logic. The ODS will be what we use for that. So our 3 core use cases for this platform and everything else we bought is both CMS final rules, but also our data interoperability for the agency with analytics, pop health, quality, all the other reporting on top of it. So and then anything else, provider roll up, all these other things that Gary's mentioned. Hopefully there's not a line outside of my boss's office with users there with requirements and looking at their wristwatch. But people are excited. They're actually seeing change and use of data, and that's really, really cool.
Yeah. Well, I think that speed to market, is valuable on a variety of fronts, and one of them is that motivating factor for your team, right? So when you see those results, it does motivate you, and you're building this foundation with the notion that you're going to expand it over time. So starting small, seeing quick wins, showing, improving, confidence with all of your various stakeholders. That's the half step. You don't have to wait, and you certainly don't have to do the big bang. This is somewhere in the middle, lowers your risk because they're smaller projects. It lowers the likelihood of protests and things that Chris mentioned. And so it seems to me this is the most logical way for folks to begin a modernization effort. And we do hope that all of you who joined us today have found this webinar to be valuable and informative. But if you need additional information or want to dive into some of your own unique needs, do reach out, and the team will be happy to respond to that. And thank you both, Chris and Gary, for your time today and sharing your experience with our audience. And we hope you'll all join us again in the future for another MarkLogic Progress webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you.
And Chris.